Hi, I'm Tyra G, your host for Frankly Speaking with Tyra G. Welcome again to our virtual global gathering of phenomenal women and those of you who love them. Yes, you, mothers, daughters, grand and great grandmothers, fearsome and generous, humble and honest, in pursuit of new possibilities. You know, here we dig deep and we come up strong. For those of you joining us for the first time, each month we cover a new theme inspired by you. Yes, I said you. We bravely go into places where tradition has taught us there's some things we just don't talk about, but not at this table. And no matter how hard judgment knocks, it will not get in. Beloved, we are here and we live beyond the wreckage. Every week, we experience, educate, encourage, and empower each other. We share some aha moments and stories that have been left in our pockets for too long. Every week we start right where we are. I can't tell you how excited I am about the show. We're at number 10 months to prove that dreams can come true. I thank God for every remembrance for each of you, for your encouragement, your ideas, your presence. Those are the gifts. I should say you are the gifts that inspire. You know, I can't do this without you. Thank you so much. You're listening to Radio Fairfax, Virginia, on your TV, computer, or mobile device. And we are webcast worldwide on the internet at www.radiofairfax.org every Saturday evening at 8 p.m. Now, I know that's date night, so should you miss us, no worries. You can find our podcast on YouTube. Just key in Frankly Speaking with Tyra G. And if you feel like communicating with me offline, you know I like that too. That's easy as well. It's Tyra at TyraG.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you, Courtney Nero, for composing and performing our Frankly Speaking theme, and for naming it, I'm Listening. Our theme these 2 months is Courageous Conversations. 2 big words, 1 big idea, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. For us to get a return on our investment, we have to show up. We have to be present, authentic, and vulnerable. We're going to have to be perfectly imperfect and to receive and love information about issues that may be uncomfortable to us, hard for us to think about, deal with, anticipate, and forgive. We're going to contemplate, evaluate, learn about, surprise, and celebrate. We have had some great feedback about our shows. We had a breast cancer survivor not once, but twice. We've dealt with sex trafficking. We've dealt with a guest who was convict to recovery to now a star citizen. We dealt with intergenerational caregiving. A woman dealing with her aunt in her 80s who has a developmental disability and shows up or presents as a young child at the age of 5. And I even threw my idea or my courageous conversation into the mix and talked about how I wasn't so courageous when they said, well, now, Tyra, it looks like you have a brain tumor. I'm going, what? So what we've discovered is courageous conversations aren't always perfect in terms of timing or execution. Sometimes they're a result of a journey, a process. And sometimes it's not even logic. What we've discovered as well is sometimes courageous conversations live in our hearts and in our minds, and they are silent. We all have times or seasons when we require courage to make it from one moment to the next, to take one step to the next. And sometimes we let fear and shame and guilt demonize our potential to overcome. But now, for today, we're going to pause in a place where we can be mirrors for one another. Our goal is to better understand topics that don't make it into polite conversations or the dinner table. We're going to look beyond and behind terms like human trafficking, domestic violence, child abuse, opioid poisoning, homelessness, developmental and intellectual disabilities, and into their potential causes and effects, the victims, the stakeholders, and the necessary related conversations. You know, I like to create a common thought space each week so that we can launch together. Today, I'm going to channel two people who will reveal through their words our topic for today. Meet Paul Curtis, 68, who lives on a narrow boat. And I quote, "My home was repossessed because I could not pay my mortgage. I became homeless when my marriage broke up, and I had taken a big mortgage, and the interest rate went up. I became overstretched when my marriage ended, and I had lost an income. And then I also lost my job. I was falling further and further behind with my debt repayment. Though I didn't know it at the time, I think I was having a mental meltdown. I wasn't able to cope, and I began to drink too much. I quit my job because I wasn't happy with the way things were being run at the organization. I imagined I'd quickly find another job, but it didn't work out that way. And I wound up homeless. Now I want you to meet Daniel. Just imagine having no good memories of your childhood. Zero. Imagine things being so bad at home that the stress seemed like a good alternative. For Daniel, none of this was imaginary. This was his life. And I quote in Daniel's words, "My dad was addicted to meth and drank a lot. Daniel told us he abused his mom and he sexually abused him for years. Eventually, his mother was no longer able to endure the constant torture. One day she left. Daniel said, I thought she would take us," meaning he and his brother with him, "but I guess she was just too scared." After that, his dad's addiction spiraled out of control. He stopped going to work, and then they were evicted. They were forced to move in with family and friends, but this did not stop his father's abuse. Listen to this. "I used to sleep in the truck outside because I was so afraid to be in the same house with him." It wasn't long before this innocent child faced a choice none of us should have to make, and remain in a violent home or risk the dangers of the street. Daniel chose the streets. Do you know that in the United States of America, there were 2 million people who were homeless migrating across the United States, about 1.56 million people, or 0.5% of the U.S. population. They used emergency shelters, transitional housing, and programming between October 1st, 2008, and September 30th, 2009. Now, this was not an event. It was a process. Homeless in the United States began increasing after the Great Recession. Just imagine this. In our nation's capital, there are 7,000 to 10,000 homeless individuals in the city right now, with housing getting more and more expensive every day. People are getting pushed out, and our clients need your help to take the next step out of homelessness. On a single night in January 2017, the number of men, women, and children in America experiencing homelessness was 564,000. They could fill nearly 8 NFL stadiums. I'd like to put in an edit here with the statement that I looked at several resources, and depending on who wrote the research and when it was done and through whose lens, you may get a variance on the numbers. But I have someone here today that can speak with authority, straighten me out, and give us a more perfect lens for Fairfax County, Virginia. According to a recent Baylor University study, people don't become homeless when they run out of money. Listen to this. at least not right away. They become homeless when they run out of relationships. Empathy goes a long way into understanding the many reasons why people become homeless. Sudden life events such as unemployment, lack of affordable housing, or medical conditions can force all people into homelessness, including you and me. As I said, after our break, you're going to meet someone who is committed to and passionate about people who are homeless. I want you to notice what I said in terms of my language. I didn't say homeless people. I said people who are homeless. People first language implies the homelessness is a condition and that we have an opportunity to change it. And that's what we want to do. We want to give hope. We want to give options so it can be changed. I remember, seems like maybe 5 years ago, in our state house, we actually addressed the language like retarded and handicapped, to make it what I call more civilized. So you stay tuned after our break. And we are back. So let's talk. Sitting right here in front of me with a big smile, I want to welcome Dean Kline, who's Fairfax County's Director of the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness. That is not a title you have to figure out. His job is to prevent and end homelessness. And Dean knows that I ask each of my guests to introduce themselves. Since this is radio, I believe your voice creates an image and your words make it more specific. So, Dean, it's your turn. Who are you?
Well, it's great to be here today. Again, Dean Kline, and I am the Director of the Office to Prevent and End Homeless in Fairfax County, but more importantly, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a social worker and come from a long line of social workers and have focused my career in social services mostly in the D.C. area. It's certainly been an interesting ride, whether it be working with actually foster youth in residential settings to those who are abused and neglected in a hospital setting, to most of my career working with those people who are homeless, who are living in a variety of settings. And so I have dedicated most of my focus to the homeless population. But I really believe that a community can and needs to be more supportive, and that with the right supports, everyone can improve and thrive. My working and leading, various nonprofit organizations and working in philanthropy, and now with Fairfax County government, I think really has prepared me for what are some very unique and real challenges for those individuals, families, and youth who are experiencing homelessness in our community. And so I'm just thrilled to be able to continue to do my work in the Fairfax Falls Church community.
I heard you say Cleveland, Ohio. Is there something else about Ohio that you want to say?
Well, first of all, I'm an Ohio State grad
Go
and fan.
Bucks! So you took the prompt. That's all I want you to do.
Usually I start with that, but depending upon who's in the room, I'm a little sensitive to that. But yes, I'm certainly an Ohio State grad and really excited about the Buckeyes.
Okay, sometimes I have to pull teeth to get certain things to happen. What I'd like to do for my audience, which is international and multicultural, is and intergenerational, is to divide our discussion into two parts. Let's look at the current environment. Think about this audience, Fairfax, Virginia. This is where we are broadcasting from, is in the top 3 richest counties in the United States. So we ask ourselves, well, how in the heck you got homeless people? There are a lot of residents who were not even aware until the light was shined on the issue that, oh my gosh, they're right over there in the park, or they're living in a car. And I know Dean has taught me this. There's so many masks to hide the homeless state. talk about that. Who are they? Where they come from? Are they poor? Who are these people?
Yeah, and I thank you for asking that question. I really think that for most citizens in Fairfax County, they're shocked to
Mm-hmm.
know that there are any homeless in our community. And certainly when you start to get into the details of what their circumstances are, they realize that many individuals in our county are very close themselves to becoming homeless themselves. But we have a means to really understand how many people are homeless in our community. We become more and more sophisticated and focused on data and really understanding who people are so that we can really direct our efforts. We can focus energy. We can change programs based on real data to hopefully impact more people and be more successful. So we use what is called a point-in-time survey, which is conducted each and every year
Mm-hmm.
and coordinated through COG. And
What does that mean? Point in time, and
well,
who is COG?
yeah, point-in-time count is in fact done on one particular day. So
Okay.
we're counting how many people are homeless on one particular day because this population is very transient. So we're looking at homeless shelters, people who are literally homeless, people who are in emergency shelters, transitional housing, those who might be living out in our wooded areas,
Yes, yes, yes.
and others who are homeless on that particular day. That way we can we can compare year to year as to how we're doing and what the trends are and what that looks like. And so we coordinate that with the Council of Governments, or COG.
Uh-huh.
So every jurisdiction in our region are doing it on the same day and
Good.
reporting it out very, around the same time. So that allows everyone to understand, well, where our numbers are up or down, others, Arlington, Alexandria, whatever that might be,
Mm-hmm.
their numbers have changed because many times people will leave our community and go to another community as well. So we want to be able to look regionally and understand how we're working together.
So what you can do, and everybody needs to understand this, by everyone doing it on the same day,
Mhm.
you can look at trends.
Yes,
You can look at pockets.
yes.
You could even look at demographics, age, gender. So when you create a report, or COG creates the report, it's showing us this view. It's giving us that information.
Yes, and we look at even more details about we look at equity issues in terms of race, whether it be white or African American or others. We look at disabilities. We look at how many people who are homeless due to domestic violence. How many of those individuals have experienced domestic violence in their lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
We look at key indicators that really help us to understand not only the homeless system, but also other service systems and other populations of people that are really included, that are subpopulations of the homeless population.
And that let's park there just for 1 second. This occurred to me because I'm doing some volunteer work with education,
Mhm.
and there are homeless children sleeping on couches
Mhm.
in other people's homes until they are asked to leave.
Mhm.
How do we count those? What do we do?
Well, that's also a very interesting question because the homeless community of providers, and including our office and others, we use the standards and the guidelines that are supported by HUD,
Okay.
Housing and Urban Development.
Mm-hmm.
But there is another federal agency, the Department of Education, that under the McKinney-Vento Act counts the numbers differently.
Okay.
So HUD counts the numbers of literally homeless, those who are in shelters,
Mm-hmm.
transitional housing, as I had mentioned. But those who are moving from couch to couch, whether it be a youth or whoever,
Mm-hmm.
that is a different definition. And so
Oh.
so the numbers that I would be prepared, like, for example, to report today are the definition that is included, in HUD.
Okay.
And all HUD programs that are supported in 500 or 600 communities around the country.
Okay.
But many school systems and many others, and very appropriately, they look at the reality of people who may not meet the HUD definition, but are clearly without a home,
Mm-hmm.
but are moving from place to place on someone's couch, living in overcrowded situations where 6, 7, 8 families
Yes. Yes.
could be residing in one location.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure that the people are aware that the numbers that we report do not include that, but that doesn't mean that those individuals are not at risk and in need of assistance.
Okay. So I've been reading a lot, since you and I last chatted. And I've been living in a space looking at shame and guilt. And you said two other things. People who are homeless are there for many reasons. And you talked about domestic violence and abuse. Very often, shame and guilt keeps that from being reported. Now, does that convolute how those people are living? Some are running away, some are running back.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we have, and this is true in many communities around the country, the capacity for housing resources for those who are homeless as well as those who experience domestic violence is limited.
Okay.
The reality is we need more affordable housing, and I'm sure we'll be getting to that a little bit later.
Yes.
But the reality for someone who's fleeing a domestic violence situation, a woman with 2 children, for example, and they go and our domestic violence shelter is full because there's limited space.
Right.
We want to provide any support in any shelter that we can in the community that will meet that need.
Okay.
Because they are technically homeless when they, by our definition and by everyone's definition. So the reality is that we have a high percentage of people who are in homeless shelters who have experienced domestic violence. Families who were homeless due to domestic violence increased this year from 60 to 71 families.
And that was okay. Now that report is different than the 1 day.
That's included in the 1 day.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
that's
one of the data points that we collect because we recognize that such a high percentage of our population, have experienced domestic violence. So it's very important.
Now the social worker in you.
Yes.
Why is that? Why is domestic violence? What do you think? What does the research say? Why are numbers going up?
Well, I think that the reality is, as I said, in most communities, there's not enough capacity to serve that population. So the numbers that we see as relates to domestic violence is probably far smaller than what the reality is in the community.
Yes.
Because the issues surrounding fear of leaving an abuser, financial means, other factors like that are critical decisions as to whether someone would leave someone due to, their spouse or significant other due to that, really are key factors in the reality of their existence and solutions. So our community has focused very intensively on that, on domestic violence, and we are trying to make sure that all systems, including the homeless system, is geared up to support individuals regardless of what door they enter.
And the thing that is right in the forefront of my mind is, with new Americans, we don't always have the cultural competence to understand how their culture deals with that. And I remember when I was working at the community college, dealing with domestic violence with a Asian community, and a mother had been removed because of the degree. The church relied on the pastor for guidance, etc. So they removed her. They put her in a hotel room, etc. But she didn't speak English. She was totally isolated. She felt worse off being removed and no longer abused than in a family/neighborhood setting. And as we worked through that situation together with the community college, the issue was, well, what did we do wrong? Well, you isolated someone that desperately needed support. And so we as Americans, I think, have to become a little bit more culturally competent to the people where we're rendering service. And that one really jerked my heart.
Yeah, I think that there are many, many policies that are in place in our community that when they were established, people maybe not had, they weren't approached with the level of sensitivity. They didn't oftentimes know what the future impact would be over many, many years.
Right.
And so you find that in housing policies, you find that in other social service policies, and just, in general, how communities are developed. So we have a new policy in Fairfax that's called One Fairfax. It's focused on equity in our community that the Board of Supervisors has adopted.
Mm-hmm.
that is very much in line with where I think our community and our homeless effort and all efforts need to go. So we're looking specifically at things as to what percentage of the homeless population is of a certain background, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a disproportionate number of individuals who are African American that is greater than what the general population
Mm-hmm.
numbers are in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And it is critical that we now start to really focus on what are the policies, what are the things that have driven our system to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've had very significant success in our homeless efforts, and certainly can share some of those numbers. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is that even with that success, we have very much a disproportionate number of individuals who are African American who are in our homeless system.
And
So,
those, yeah, the of course, I hear it from a different perspective,
mhm.
being an African American woman and understanding our history,
Mhm.
which is very family oriented, and we're so used to taking care of our own. And by the time you're in the homeless system, again, shame and guilt is associated. I don't have a place to live, I don't have a job, I don't have this, I don't have the other. And so, yeah, I can understand that. I I also wanted to think about children
Mhm.
of new American families. One, again, this was, bless their heart, this was an Asian family, and no one spoke English but the child who was in school. And that child had to go to the doctor with the grandparents and do the translation. And that was so against any culture. You don't talk about you don't do that. And so the child is conflicted and has that burden. I spoke with the one of the administrators of Second Story,
Mhm.
and she came as a 9-year-old from Asia, and she was that person, children in translation. And you know what she said? She got to a certain age, preteen, teen, she was mad. She was angry because all of that was on her. And she began to act out. So when we talk about, Dean, I think when you're saying systems, we're looking at an integrated approach,
Correct.
the whole person.
Yes.
And what happened? How did we get to one Fairfax? Did the Board of Supervisors decide, oh, we got an issue? How did that happen?
Well, I think that over time, when we look at the changes that are happening in the community, when we look at the amount of wealth, and then also the amount of social issues and the urbanization of the county, and
Mm-hmm.
the coming of major
Mm-hmm.
metro,
Mm-hmm.
and different factors, and the economic success of the community, and what's happened with all of that. I think that it was very important for the board to look at issues surrounding is everyone
Mm-hmm.
in the
Thank you.
community.
Thank you.
Are the
Yes.
homeless benefiting? Are people who are lower income? Are people who are from a different country? Are people
Yes.
who
Yes.
are working 2 or 3 jobs? For example, we have adults in our homeless shelters, family shelters,
Mm-hmm.
where the adults in those families are working 2 or 3 jobs and cannot afford to live in our community.
Now, I want you to park there. That's significant.
Mhm.
And people to me, that's one we need to highlight. We can think of one particular shelter that's a family shelter. What's the process? How do I get in there? We know it's overcrowded, but we know it's wonderful and what it delivers.
Mhm.
Me and my children am I already in the system to get into a family shelter? How does that happen? Do I walk in the front door?
Yeah, well, we have a 222 number, a phone number that people contact in our community, and so that number, would be sort of critical to people who are homeless.
Mm-hmm.
Then we assess what their means are, what their resources are. About 9 or 10 years ago, our first questions were not about keeping people in their homes.
Okay.
It was more about, people, well, we need to immediately provide shelter. They're homeless. They're saying that
Mm-hmm.
they're
Mm-hmm.
homeless. And so we've changed our paradigm, our approach, to really put more resources towards keeping people in their homes. So if
Okay.
you and your family were at the risk of becoming homeless, you were about to be evicted and contacted our county, we would be looking at what resources would be needed to keep you in your unit
Okay.
rather than you becoming homeless and entering the system and entering a homeless shelter, which is not a place for people to stay. We want people to be staying as short a period of time in a shelter and to move people as quickly as possible to affordable housing that's safe and affordable, where kids can continue to stay in school and individuals can continue to work and thrive. And so we try to make prevention a key factor. We realize that we can't be every family looking at every family in the same way, and so we really try to tailor housing resources and services, whether they be mental health or substance abuse or employment or whatever they might be, to the individuals rather than cookie cutter. That's really allowed us to make sure that our resources are being used in the most effective way, and that we're able to move as quickly as possible, and that people are in the end more successful with that approach.
So I'm hearing you say, Tyra, the county has evolved, and we are looking at people as people, and we're looking at keeping them stable, right, whenever possible, before entering the system that deals with people who are homeless. We are understanding job issues, mental health issues. We're taking all of those into consideration at point of contact. And we have this wonderful number for all our listeners who are local, 222
0880.
0880. It's reach out if you need help.
Exactly.
One of the big things, and there's a new nonprofit called Just Ask, and that's what we want our people to do. One thing I remember when I was at the county was an interesting phenomenon. You mentioned Metro. Okay, so we are watching poverty and urbanization move away, and yet many of the services stay centralized. And so the issue, the critical path, is transportation. So there are people who have a job out here and live way over here, and the metro stops running here, and the buses stop running here. Is that a part of the solution ideas, or I know it's a part of the problem, but is anybody focusing on that?
Well, I think there's a tremendous amount of attention on that, and I think that what we need to do is move away from looking at transportation issues for the homeless needs to be looked at in a separate way. Transportation is a critical issue for everyone who's living in our region, in our county. People struggle to get to work. People are spending more time in their cars, having a difficult time, with more and more development. So the same solutions that are for someone who is making $200,000 and living in a very large house somewhere is the same solution it is for someone who's working 2 or 3 jobs in a homeless shelter, where they also need transportation and be able to get to and from work quickly and need our roads and our forms of transportation to be effective. So I think in the past we've said, oh, well, we need special transportation modes, because these people
These
over here.
No, those people.
The individuals who are homeless in our community, the solutions oftentimes are the same solutions of housing, affordable housing, transportation, health care, having a job that you're going to be able to support your family. All those issues are the same as those who are living independently in our community that can do that without entering our homeless shelters. So supporting Metro, supporting other creative solutions, the use of Uber and other Lyft and other means like that are a new innovative idea. And now people are thinking, oh, well, we could do that, and we can transport, kids or homeless children or any children using, Uber rather than having some sort of county vehicle or some nonprofit vehicle transport them. Is that a better way? Is that a more costly, cost-effective manner? So I think that people are really looking for, to use cutting-edge, more relevant, more progressive solutions for transportation that will hopefully help.
I interviewed a wonderful guest the other night, And I remember our first phone conversation, and she called me Miss G. Tyra G, she called me Miss G. She said, Miss G, I wanted to call you before I caught my bus to take my train to catch my bus to get to class. I think that said it in a nutshell.
Exactly.
But what the differentiation was, she wanted she wanted what comes out of her education.
Right. And, and I don't know her background, but I know many parents who are homeless with children, they want that, but
Yes.
also they have barriers. And they
Yes.
have, their child has a disability. Their child, has moved from school to school, has moved from 5 different schools, and has learning disabilities behind in school, needs special educational
Right.
supports. They have healthcare challenges. Their car is broken down, whatever those might be,
Right.
that prevent them from, in addition to the drive, to the interest, to the motivation for a better
Yes.
life, that makes it a huge barrier.
Well, what I what is both the problem and the solution? It's interesting. Transportation, affordable housing, jobs.
Hmm.
Okay. So we've been talking about this is the current environment. This is what's going on. Here's some trends. This is a big pocket of people we need to address. Let's flip the script. Let's talk about, okay, what are we going to do about that? But before we flip the script, I'm going to flip the button for just a second. Stay close now. And we are back again. I am with Mr. Dean Kline, someone who has committed the past 8 years.
Oh, no. Well, more. 9.5 years.
Not, oh, really? We're that close?
Yeah,
9.5 years. We've been focusing on homelessness and people who are homeless and the conditions that walk people into that space, whether they want to be there or not. We are going to flip the script and we're going to look at some solutions that our particular county is addressing and has prioritized. And I'm hoping Dean will cover things like partnerships and budgets, how we're getting money for these programs, how they're funded, and also what are some of the biggest challenges. But I'd like for us to lead with what are some of the biggest wins.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd love to talk about this. Well, as you had mentioned earlier in 2008, in 2008, our Board of Supervisors, our community, our nonprofits, our businesses, faith communities, and government agencies all came together and realized that we were managing homelessness and we needed a new paradigm. We looked nationally. We looked at Columbus, Ohio, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Denver, Colorado, and we looked to the National Alliance to End Homelessness. And so in the end, we developed a 10-year plan for our community that was very innovative and progressive. And so we've been working the plan. And so we have a lot of really innovative and important strategies that are included in that. But overall, through our overall efforts over the last 9+ years, we have reduced our homeless numbers by nearly 50%, 46% overall. And we've seen a reduction in every category: homeless singles, homeless families, children and families, adults and families, people experiencing homelessness for chronic homelessness, and families becoming homeless, due to domestic violence. So
Now, when you said we reduced,
yes,
you can't just drop that there. What do we
Yes.
do?
Well, first of all, we went from about 1,800 individuals counted in that point in time
Okay.
to under 1,000. Now we're at 987. And so we implemented a housing first strategy.
Okay.
And so what that means is that we've been, as I mentioned, increasing our prevention efforts, where we have worked on efficiencies, moving people more quickly out of homeless shelters. We changed our way of getting into family shelters, and there was a waiting list at that time for 3, 4, 5 months for families who were homeless. Imagine being homeless, yet you had to wait 3 to 4 months to get into a homeless shelter.
And where are you in
And
between?
we changed, right. And so where do they go? What do they do? So now there's, it's three or 4 days. So we've, increased our prevention efforts. We've determined who is the best individuals to be serving in the shelter,
Okay.
and then how can we serve the others in different ways. So we've implemented a housing first strategy. We have looked at a variety of housing resources. We've taken transitional housing programs, which were 2-year programs,
Mm-hmm.
and changed that to a permanent supportive housing model. And so what some of these changes has meant is that when we started, we had more homeless singles in our community
Mm-hmm.
than we had actually more homeless families, persons in families, than homeless single individuals. But that now has switched.
Okay.
And so we now have more, we have 49% of people are in families,
Mm-hmm.
and 51% are single individuals.
How's the housing work for them?
Well, I mean, the solutions for a homeless person who's single,
Yes.
who oftentimes might be older in age,
Yes.
we have an
Mhm.
increasing older age population, those who've experienced mental health,
Mhm.
substance abuse,
Mm-hmm.
the rate of housing and identifying housing solutions for them is lower than those with families, even though, we have had a lot of housing resources come into our community over the last 8 or 9 years.
Mhm.
We still are challenged with that homeless single population to continue to find,
Do
adequate resources.
group homes
Hmm.
as one part of the solution. Do you run into, or does the county run into, not in my backyard kind of situations where communities aren't that open to having a resident or group home for people who may be homeless, and you just said may have mental health issues,
Hmm.
may have disabilities, et cetera, et cetera? How's that working?
Well, it's interesting you say that because we've had homeless shelters in our community for a long time, and we've identified 4 of them that are at the most risk of being really in need of dire rehab or rebuild. And so we put forward a human services bond, and all of our citizens voted yes,
Mm-hmm.
which is now bringing $48 million to
Excellent.
rebuild 4 shelters.
Excellent.
So as part of that process, in one of our shelters in particular, we looked at a temporary location so that we could move people out of the existing shelter
Mm-hmm.
while we rehabbed and rebuilt the existing shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And we came up against such significant NIMBYism and challenges in that community.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that location was the most ideal. In all honesty, it wasn't. It was our best option at that time.
Okay.
What that really motivated us to do is to find more quickly a permanent good solution.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, we purchased an old vet clinic. We've torn it down. We're moving forward with our first of the 4 being
Okay.
rebuilt, and so that will be ready in November of 2019.
Now, how many will that accommodate, that facility?
It's really exciting. It's a new model for shelters in our community. So it will include emergency shelter, where we'll have the capacity to house 50 individuals as we
Oh,
as we
wow.
currently
Okay.
do an emergency.
Uh-huh.
It's more of a crisis response. We're
Okay.
looking at stabilizing people and helping to find them housing.
Okay.
But then in addition, we'll have 4 medical respite beds. And so we only have 4 in the entire county, and this new shelter will have 4 in itself.
Now, how will it be staffed, Dean?
Well, the medical respite beds, the shelter in general will be under contract with a nonprofit organization.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But the medical respite beds are very unique, and these are individuals who are being kicked out or being asked to leave a hospital with still very significant medical conditions. They might be on a need, intensive medical attention. They may be on an IV. They might have other
And are kicked out.
Yes, and then they become homeless, and then they have to enter a homeless shelter.
Right,
Now, if
right,
that
right.
shelter is not prepared to
Yeah.
deal with that level of medical issue,
Right, right.
it's a problem. So with having medical respite beds, that will add more capacity for us to meet that need. And then finally, we will be also having housing as part of that shelter, and so we will have 15 permanent supportive housing units that are also part of that shelter. So there'll be people in the emergency side, 50 and up to 50
Yeah, yeah,
people,
yeah.
including then an additional 4 for medical respite.
Right.
And then also part of that same facility is permanent supportive
Like
housing.
apartments?
Right. So people can move from a more crisis situation to a permanent solution where there will be no time limit for those individuals.
That sounds exciting. It
Yes.
really does. And I love the fact because you didn't say the word partnership, but that's even a collaboration. That's more than a partnership.
And so, the partnership that goes into every single solution for individuals can never be underestimated.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're dealing with when we're working with people who have been isolated,
Yes.
who
Yes.
come
Yes.
to our program and to the county, or are in such need of support when they don't have the adequate family supports or friends, or they've exhausted those. And what it requires for the type of solution in such an expensive area that
Yes.
we live
Yes.
in.
Yes.
And it's so costly, and the services might be 3 or 4 or 5 different types of services, and
For
you have
one
kids and-
individual.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't expect nonprofits or government
To do
or,
it.
to do it alone. So our faith community has stepped up big time,
You're reading my mind.
and so
Yes.
have companies, and
Okay.
so we look forward to their continued support.
Well, now we've talked, when you said companies, right away I flipped into money. So budgeting for housing first, you talked about the bond that was floated. What other kinds of things are you counting on to resource that initiative, or that strategy is what it is?
Well, we have, and I don't ever want to underestimate the commitment that we receive from our local government for our existing homeless programs and
Good.
Fairfax County government, and
Yes.
the support of. We unfortunately have to operate 6 emergency shelters, and each and every day they're full. So that requires a level of commitment from our county government. And then in addition, we operate a hypothermia program with 45 to 50 faith
Yes.
communities.
Yes. Yes.
And that is mostly done through the donations, volunteer support, and the opening up of faith community sites during the cold weather. But in addition, we really benefit from $8+ million of federal resources through HUD, other state resources that are all aligning and supporting our existing strategies, our outcomes, our goals that are about self-sufficiency. It's about use of dollars and making sure that they're being used in the most effective way. It's about how long it's taking us from the time someone enters a shelter to the time that they're housed. It's about other really important critical factors and so we've ensured that all homeless programs are rowing in the same direction. So when we look at robust data collection, we can tell how we're doing, and we can direct our resources and our efforts, appropriately. But in addition, we have our nonprofit providers who each and every day are working in partnership with us. They're also doing fundraising. They're also working to ensure that they're engaging businesses and the community and faith community and others to get dollars as much as they can so that they can implement services.
The energy I'm feeling across the board from me says I'm going to have to ask Dean to come back.
Yes, indeed.
Because, there are all kinds of questions, of course, I have, but we could only do a 50,000-foot dive right now. I want to move toward, we're almost out of time. I want to move towards something I asked Dean to do, and you need to understand he didn't do it. I ask each of my guests to write a letter to their younger selves, and Dean comes and said, well, I didn't do that. And so I said, okay, fine. And then he said,
well, we've adjusted it a little bit.
And so what we're going to do is, Dean has wonderful family. And I remember when I first met him, he had a lovely daughter who was not the 18-year-old she is now.
Correct.
And she was a little something. I remember meeting her sitting in my office, and she was just pleasant. She was a princess. So I said, okay, Dean, you're not going to write a letter to yourself. Why don't you have a conversation with your daughter now and say some of the things you would say to her that help her travel her road forward? And he's going to do that now, right, Dean?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
This is an exciting task, a very unique task. I would really focus my efforts, what I say to my daughter, on really 3 things. First, to be the best person that she can be, and that on any given day, everyone is faced with challenges of how they can support other people and how they engage with people and how they look at the world. So I really don't, underestimate the importance of respect
Mm-hmm.
of herself and others, and ensuring that her eyes are wide open. I guess the second thing would be to really focus her energies on what makes you happy. I mean, we have a lot of needs in the community, and I've spent my career in social services, and I could rattle off so many areas where people could really get engaged. But really harnessing the power of what motivates her and to
Mm-hmm.
be happy, I think really will ensure that she will be positively engaged and motivated. And then I guess thirdly, just really appreciating. We talked about homelessness today, recognizing in our community that could happen to me, it could happen to anyone.
Absolutely.
And so for a younger generation, ensuring that they understand that that is the reality and to appreciate what they have, but also to ensure that they're doing everything they can and that she would be doing, living a life, ensuring that she's helping others.
She off to college?
She's off to college. 3 months.
Okay. It's not quite an empty nest, though, yet.
No, we're preparing.
Are you?
Yeah.
Well, I always think of when I hear fathers talk about their daughters. I am at the end of my toilet paper roll in life, and I'm still daddy's little girl. I don't think that goes away, no matter where daddy
No
is.
way.
But Dean, I want to thank you
No, it's been a true pleasure.
for the time, the energy, the information. I know my audience appreciates it. And again, this is our theme on Courageous Conversations. That's a space where we don't spend a lot of time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for including me.
I also want to remind my audience that your space is reserved at the table. All you have to do is tune in to www.radiofairfax.org. And your affirmations for the mirror. After you brush your teeth, you stand there and you look at yourself and you say, you are worthy. You say, I'm worthy. You say, I'm not my circumstance. Nothing that has happened to me will be wasted. The good, the bad, the ugly. Most importantly, you are not alone ever. Refuse to be refused. I want you to know I love this time with you. I look forward to next week. We're going to just relax a little bit, our last minute we have. I will see you next time. Remember, I'm here and I'm listening. This is Tyra. Bye now.